So we sort of do two things this afternoon. One, we'll talk about the resource discovery, and I made some mention earlier about Vivo and profile system for being able to identify investigator level resources, and then Eagle Eye for being able to identify research resources. I figured rather than my talking about it, because it's actually, as I mentioned, Vivo, part of the U24 Vivo team has been Ponce, and part of the Eagle Eye is UPR. And UPR has also been involved in some work with Vivo as well. So I want to ask, so I have asked, I will ask Rick Noel when he comes back from Ponce to maybe talk a little bit about it, but José Conde from UPR is here, and he's sort of been leading that, so I think he can probably give people an update as to what's really going on, and I think that would be much more relevant and more practical than my trying to sort of talk about it more theoretically. So let's welcome UPR's own José Conde.
Well, thank you, Keith. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, in a nutshell, the Eagle Eye Consortium is a group of 9 institutions that are working together to develop a search system for research resources. Basically, what we're developing is a prototype of that system so that in the end, it could be extended to the whole United States, so that any investigator within the United States or even outside of the United States can go to the system, find out specific resources, and then ask the investigator that's in charge of those resources whether they want to do any collaborative research with them. Let me give you an example. Let's say that someone wants to do some research on, let's say, metabolic diseases in Puerto Rico. We have a newborn screening system here in Puerto Rico. So that system is developing a repository of samples, so that's a resource that, in my view, is unique because it's just for Puerto Ricans. It's for the Puerto Rican population. It covers all births. So we haven't put it into the system yet, but in the future, for example, if someone wants to look for a partner to do that kind of research and provide some samples, for example, that could be done in Puerto Rico. And the only thing that the investigator would have to do is go to the system, find out what's the resource that he or she needs. Then there's the contact information. There's information about what kind of resources are there, what kind of technologies, services, so that if there's a resource that's of interest for that researcher, then he or she can just contact the person in charge of that resource and then establish a collaboration. So it's definitely will make things a lot easier. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what Eagle Eye is. At this time, I'm very happy to report that we're just testing the prototype. It's online, but it's only available for the 9 participating institutions at this time. And we're just testing the system. It's using advanced search systems like semantic technologies and other components. The builds team at Harvard is doing a great job. The Jackson State group is doing a great job maintaining the servers. The ontology group, it's located at the Oregon Health Sciences University. And the other institutions are also looking for resources in their respective areas and then putting them into the system. So that's basically what the Eagle Eye project is. Karam, you have a question?
Yeah, I just, first, when it's going to be available, and second question, well, I remember Harvard is part of it. Who exactly is a member of the
Yes. The lead institution is Harvard. The other institutions are Jackson State, Montana, Dartmouth College, University of Puerto Rico Medical Sciences Campus, University of Montana, well, Hawaii, of course, Morehouse, and I'm leaving a couple more. I always forget a few. And Oregon Health Sciences University, and this. Okay, so that's the team. When will it be available?
for us, I mean,
According to the grant, my best recollection is that the deliverable for NIH is to have a prototype available, and then we would have the code and then give it to NIH, and from then on, there would be some other development. Whether there's additional funding or there will be additional mechanisms for funding the developing of that prototype, that's something that at least is not that clear at this time. I don't know, maybe you have more information on that.
Just add something.
Sure.
And I agree with everything you said. As you know, at the last Ph.D. meeting with the RCMI program, we presented the proposal to extend the resource to all RCMI institutions. In other words,
Mhm.
total R-term. Keith and myself and Rick and Gary Gibbons from Morehouse visited with PI at Harvard 2 weeks ago, was it, Keith? 2 weeks ago to discuss this. It was received extremely well. Rick, a while back, had proposed in a meeting we had in Alaska that there be a pilot project to include a portion of the R-term and some idea states in a sort of an extended beta test. Like what Jose's talking about is sort of the first release is a beta test. First deployment is a beta test with the 9 consortium. We want to extend it beyond that to include the entire R-term. And in the initial phase of that deployment, if this goes the way we want it to, we will just inventory the core laboratories for the entire R-term. There are a number of resource types that we can and we have inventory for the 9-member consortium, but for R-term, phase 1 will be to just inventory the core laboratories. And that would be a fantastic contribution for R-term, for us to know, as Keith had pointed out, so many of our resources are invisible. We hope after that, as we answer all these unknown
Logistics,
questions here,
yes.
Jose, that we'll be able to include other resource types, you know, like human studies, reagents, and so forth and so on. Okay?
Yeah. Well, basically, that's everything I had to say about Eagle Eye. If there are any questions? By the way, if there are, but the faculty of Medical Sciences campus should have received a couple of emails during this week telling about the beta testing and how to access the system and all that. So.
And I tested it, and it's quite friendly.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
very intuitive.
Yeah.
It's very friendly.
Margarita was so enthusiastic that she sent.
in the PRC portal, and she
Yeah.
said, this is the prototype.
Yes.
You can't have it in the
Yes,
prototype.
she sent me an email asking, okay, oh, that's fine. When can we have it in the PRC as a link? And well, it's a prototype still, Margarita. Just wait a second.
Now, Jose's very modest, and I know him well. Could you share the Core Bucks program? Because
Oh
you
yes,
the drive-
yeah, that's a good point. One way of testing the system and also promoting the use of the system among the participating institutions is through the Core Bucks program. In the Core Bucks program, what Eagle Eye is doing is that they're funding a limited number of proposals to use resources that are located using the system that are not available on our own institutions. For example, if I want to do some research on, I don't know, using some imaging technologies that I don't have here, I go there, or maybe analyzing some samples in some sophisticated way that I don't have the instrumentation here. If I can identify that resource elsewhere through the Eagle Eye system, I can then write a proposal to the Eagle Eye Consortium, and then after review and everything, if they accept it, they will provide limited funds to actually pay access to that resource that I already identified through the system. So that's the Core Bucks program. And then there's also another incentive for those people who use the system, even if they don't participate in the Core Bucks program. They can win a gift, an Amazon card, $50. So it's about they have about 50 of those. So that's another incentive for people who are not Core Bucks participants, but who are just using the system and providing input on how to use it. So that's basically what Eagle Eye is, and If there are any other questions, Rick.
So the beta version that was tested, is that to actually put in new resources or to search for resources or to both?
No, that's the search system. Yes, the actual data entry is being performed through the Eagle, using the Eagle Eye staff at this point. Yes, but that's just a search system. That's the
In
yes.
the future, I'm sorry to cut you off before.
Yes.
Do you know in the future, so,
I think I know what you're going to ask, but go ahead.
well, institutions will take the responsibility for putting that in
I
and
understand.
keeping it up to date.
Yeah,
That's what my guess is gonna be.
Yeah, the question would be who will take care of putting more information and updating the system.
It's never gonna be the individual, it's gonna be the organization.
We're looking at different ways of doing this. For example, if researchers have laboratory information management systems and they can be connected to Eagle Eye, then if they use these resources locally, then maybe we can get that information with their approval and then put it there. Another possibility, and I'm not sure whether there's been any NIH conversations with NIH about this, is to actually have NIH somehow through their policies, for example, or using their information systems, allow Eagle Eye to go to those information systems, grab information with some kind of natural language processing software or anything, and then bring the information into the system. So there are different ways. We don't have the final answer or answers to that question. I'm going to ask the question about you. I'm going to ask the same question about you, okay? It's okay, I know. We're in the same boat. Any other questions? I already gave you a couple of, I'm just kidding. Any other questions related to Eagle Eye?
So,
Rick?
Jose, I'm curious to know, do you have some sense of how many people or how many faculty have tried?
Actually, I sent an email to Richard, Richard Pierce, the lead research navigator at Harvard, and he sent me a number. I think it was about 23 people that have already individual users. There are more hits, but it's about 23. So it's modest, but I hope we can increase that in the next couple of weeks.
Are you offering additional incentives locally?
No,
No.
no,
You know,
not
because
at all.
this is probably well known to you too, but OHSU as of yesterday, I think,
Mm-hmm.
like 560 unique users.
Wow.
They're offering 5 iPads though.
Wow. Digo, yo vuelvo y entro.
So does that mean that we have some funds from the PRC-TRC collaborations and partnerships?
RCMI.
I'm just kidding. No, we don't have that. We don't have the funds to do that. Yeah. Any other questions?
I just want to just add one other thing, Jose. This system is, as Margarita has confirmed, is very intuitive. But this system, as we talk about in our turn, we consider is one of the really fundamental tools that's going to drive research collaboration across these great distances and so forth. So we're giving careful consideration to including this as we move forward with renewal. One example of the viability of this system, about 6 months into our project,
Mm-hmm.
the people at Dartmouth, before the initial version came
Mhm.
out, they saw the potential of this system, and the PI that works for Dartmouth, as Jose and Rick and I work for our institutions, went to his endowment, and they invested to sustain that system forward for their institution. And that's a very, very strong statement about the viability of this system. As we move forward here, and Jose and Rick and I and others start to get some of these fine answers to some of these questions that are very important in terms of resourcing this deployment, we need to think seriously about how we're going to sustain this Eagle Eye deployment. But also, as program directors, you probably need to start thinking about, as we provide this information to you, how you can sustain this, because you can't just look at a program level. You have to look at all the cores. In other words, for every core, there either has to be a limb, but there really have to be people it's not gonna be automated.
Yeah, well,
You know, eventually it might be, but you're gonna have to have people that are responsible to sustaining this
Yeah.
initially. So I think this should be on everyone's,
yeah.
you know, front part of your list.
Let-
moving forward.
Let me respond to that. I'm not the program director, I'm the associate director, so I cannot speak about for Emma, but under the current economic situation, I think many of our institutions will be very hard pressed to actually come up with institutional resources. That's my feeling at this time. I don't know whether at the other institutions will be the same. But that's a model that we definitely should consider, but we would have to think very closely about where we would get that. And on the other hand, when we started the project, there was, my impression was that there would come up some kind of funding to actually continue with this, that it would not be part of the actual funds. It would be actually adding an additional infrastructure to each institution, which may not have been planned in the past. But again, that's my gut feeling about this. But definitely it's something that we should discuss. I think ELA is great. I mean, and as Jim is saying, I think it's a great resource, not just for the RCMI community, but any institution in the future. Actually, one of the things that I've thought is that in the same fashion that Internet 2 has peers around the world, I wouldn't be surprised in the future that we could have some peers of Eagle Eye in different parts of the world, and then we can actually connect each of those systems so that we can actually do global search for resources. And then you can actually, for example, if Rick, you're doing research, you're in Hawaii, but you do a lot of research in Vietnam, and you could actually look for resources there. So the potential is there. I only hope that we can get more funding for this initiative, definitely. Any other
Maybe
questions?
not government funding, probably private funding.
I don't know. We have to think about it, because we need to think about what would be the incentive for the private sector to actually get involved in this.
The actual, and I am, of course, as you know, computer specialist.
Mhm.
What is the computer-based software or platform or whatever that we use?
But I think it's beyond that. I mean, the ultimate purpose of this system was to, in my view, was to actually make the research enterprise more efficient by eliminating duplication. So in my view, that's in the main interest of both NIH and our institutions. Whether that kind of, that mindset is being shared by other sectors of society, I don't know. But that's what actually is moving the Eagle Eye project. I think we need to go on. We can talk about these things afterwards, but I don't want to keep more time on this. So thank you so much.
So as I mentioned earlier, there's two levels of sort of identifying resources broadly. One is the research resources, the other is the sort of investigator resources. And Vivo and Profiles are sort of the two systems that are leading the way. Vivo is part of a large U24 initiative through the National Center for Research Resources. Ponce School of Medicine and Health Sciences is part of that. And Rick Noel has been involved in leading that for Ponce, so let's give him a warm Puerto Rican welcome.
Thanks very much, Keith. Yeah, so I'll be pretty brief, okay? I just want to tell you, just generally, Vivo, what is Vivo? It's kind of like, who's heard of LinkedIn as a professional network, right? Or there's biomed experts. Who's heard of Facebook? No. Facebook is not professional, right? So LinkedIn is a professional network. Biomed experts is professional, but you self-deposit that information, so there's a question of who's federating that information. Vivo and Profiles, to a certain extent, institutions have their own in-house means of cataloging their faculty to a certain extent. Why would an institution do this? To help people find each other. The emphasis for Vivo came at Cornell, so Cornell originally developed a program called Vitro, which became Vivo when it went outside of Cornell. Okay? So And Florida, University of Florida was the first institution to kind of partner with Cornell, and even before the Vivo grant, they made something called Gator, because it's UFL, University of Florida, the Gators. Okay, yeah. Well, you can understand schools have their pride. So these are huge campuses that have faculty who can't find each other on their own campus. Even sometimes we have relatively big campuses and people don't find each other. This is a way for people to find experts, but to have federated data that's institutionally backed, and much like what was mentioned for Eagle Eye, the ability to search these profiles of people is much more sophisticated than the typical Google search. It uses the semantic web, and we also have an ontology group that's spanned across different groups, and the ontology is just the way that the data in the database are related to each other that makes the searches very intelligent. So it's a much more powerful search tool than what's typically available or has been available up to date to find people, and it has data that's backed by the institution, because the institution's responsible for populating the data. And the institution doesn't want to be wrong, right? So Vivo involves 7 schools. Ponce is the smallest one, actually. The main grantee is the University of Florida, and the main developers are Florida, Indiana, and Cornell. And then also Washington University in St. Louis also has an important role. And then there's 3 other schools that are just implementing. Ponce is one, Scripps is another, and then Weill Cornell is another that's mostly an implementing school. What else shall I say about it? We now have, well, I guess I can answer a question before it's asked. A little bit different than what the Eagle Eye has confronted in terms of trying to figure out how to open this up to the public. Vivo's already been open, and it's available as an open source program that there have been schools who are not part of the original 7 who have already adopted. And in fact, José Conde had approached us some time ago and has been pushing forward with UPR to adopt. And we're trying, he can't get support directly from the, yeah, he has, okay, great. So he can't get support directly from the network, but we can provide that as a liaison of support. And we can do that for any of the RCMI institutions to a certain extent, in terms of telling you what we went through. If you have particular questions, because your institution is a little bit different than our institution, we're very small, so we're good for other small RCMI schools, or G12 or center schools. Some of the bigger ones, maybe we can get in touch with the people in the original network, in the funded network, and say, okay, what do you have to solve this particular problem? Sometimes some of the biggest problems are access to the data, right? Because you need the access to the data to be able to put it up, and departments sometimes control certain amounts, certain levels of records, or sometimes the human resources, and trying to get the permissions to be able to say what's going to appear or what's not going to appear. Some of the larger schools have gone through that. Those are probably the main challenges that come up front. The first versions of the software were not particularly good for ingesting material from public databases. Those things have been improved, so at least the human resources needed are there, but they've been reduced. I suppose I should take a question I have.
Yeah, before you left the human resource bit,
Yep.
I understand for the larger institutions, they're probably all digitized and everything with human resources and so forth, but.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. But so what kind of challenges does that present, in terms of responsibilities for keeping things updated, if you have these spiders going out, or whatever they're using to go out and capture the data from human resource databases? Because I know at our institution, that would be a real hill to climb.
Yep.
For me to even go in there and ask that.
Right, for them. So keeping it up to date, the plan, so again, we have similar difficulties in terms of continuity, what's going to happen after the funding's gone. Each institution probably will have to find their own solutions to a certain extent, but learn from the experiences of others. The goal with the Vivo platform, and part of the emphasis behind opening it up to the public as early as it was opened, because actually the first versions that were opened up to the public were not particularly user-friendly, and the latest version is pretty good. So, is to make it pretty clear to users why they want to have their profile up to date. So the idea of having tools that can mine the data in vivo and perhaps prepare your 424 SF424 biosketch for you, or populate your, I mean, probably with Eagle Eye, populate your resources. That could be a good incentive for people to keep their profiles or to be able to get into the Eagle Eye network. A good reason to, so much like Eagle Eye is trying to figure out a way to continue, Vivo's trying to figure out a way to make itself essential to an institution to invest in it. And it's essential if the investigators are saying, I want this tool at my place because it makes my life easier. If there could be tools developed to have reports for the institution on what their faculty are doing, to use it to make profiles of some of the highlight research that's going on, or geographical research. Do we have investigators working in this area? So the goal is to make it an essential tool so that it will be something institutions will find they can't not invest in. Okay, so I mean, that's not really answering the question specifically, but the point is it's going to need to be driven by the need to use, I think.
So I think for some of the standard form outputs, that would certainly increase
It'll start.
efficiencies, in terms of proposal development and so forth, because that's a real pain if you're doing collaborative research across institutions, just getting that.
And getting them on the right forms, the right versions, yeah.
But there are challenges there because of the personal statement requirement now.
Oh, yeah.
So that, I don't know how you're going to deal
Yeah.
with that. The other question is Vivo operate on a federated system base?
Yes.
Is it limited to biomedical sciences or just?
I believe that the emphasis, so we only have biomedical sciences at our school. And in some of the other places, so Cornell, I don't think it's limited only to bio, it's not. In Florida, they started populating most of the biological sciences, biomedical sciences, but no, it's not limited to that. And it's actually, there's a couple of international adopters too. The idea is not just to limit to, I mean, it's biological sciences is the focus of the Vivo grant because it's funded by the NIH. The goal of the Vivo project is not going to be limited only to biomedical research and not only to the US either. Okay?
So I'm curious, at Ponce, in populating your Vivo database, how did you actually calculate your denominator? How many people were you trying to capture?
Yeah.
And how did you arrive at that number?
Yeah, so I suppose that we did that on the basis of the faculty database that we have and ingested that, and it came through email records, right, Damandis? Or through, you guys have a record of all the people who, from the human resources database, yeah. So it's from human resources, and we were limited to faculty, but then also to some informatics staff as well. People in the library, and then people as well in the information systems departments. Even with that subcategory, we have quite a bit more information in certain groups of faculty than in other groups of faculty. And so there's going to be a question of at what level is a faculty member full-time enough or complete enough to be included. I think that decision probably it needs to be made at the local level, as opposed to it's not a national issue. So it's for the instance of Vivo at the institution that's implementing to make, either decide they're going to do it in stages, which I think would probably make the most sense, or to decide which categories they're going to aim for.
How much in-depth information required for each faculty?
So there's a minimum now of like department affiliation, their degrees. The publications can be ingested through PubMed, but it's a considerable amount of work to make sure that you have the correct author, because sometimes people have common last name, and so when you ingest from PubMed, you get too many. They're working on getting grants ingested, at least from public databases, as much as possible, but that's not a mandatory component that needs to be part of a complete record. So there's quite a bit of flexibility in terms of what can be included in the record. The thrust now is to get the person's information, their training information, and information about their research area so they can be found for their expertise. but there's quite a few.
Facilities or-
No, that actually it's not going to have facilities. It will have expertise and specialization and record of accomplishment.
You can associate resources through the Eagle Eye.
Yeah.
But, you know, they can work hand in hand.
Yeah, they actually are. I mean, the programs actually have a common teleconference with the NCRR. It's monthly, I think, and so there is quite a bit of coordination at the national level between the two programs in order to make sure. I mean, their ontologies are being designed to be consistent with each other, so that they will work in either platform.
So I'm still unclear about one thing. How much of this information is manually entered as opposed to just, you know, taken?
That kind of depends on what is the level of computerization that you have in your system. So our manual entry, well, we have a pretty small faculty. So initially, publications had to be manually entered. And that was clear that wasn't going to work. So we only put in a couple to make some of the records look good. There will be, so part of the thing I think that we're going to emphasize is, so the national grant, or the national program, has these certain criteria that they want as a minimum Vivo record. And we may leave up to our faculty to be able to put in more details. Because we certainly want the faculty, once we have the record populated, they need to make sure it's correct. Right? They're the best ones to do the final disambiguation and see if we're missing anything or if we have something that doesn't belong. And so if they want to customize certain parts, the software itself is relatively easy to work with and interact with now. And so they can be trained reasonably, probably at a department level, can be trained reasonably effectively to be able to put in what they want to keep their page up to date or to add things in that are beyond the minimum.
Let me ask, now, Jose, this is a question for both of you. Now, you know, we're kind of adopting profile platform for the network. Now, if we call the directory, you know, the our turn scientist directory, we did the manual thing and we ported that over to profiles. Now, there's no problem with these, with the Vivo and profiles, you know, talking to each other, but it's going to be an our turn scientist directory. So, what are your thoughts on moving information between those two?
I think if you've already, and you can just adapt it whatever you think. If you haven't made a selection one way or the other, so if a school's already invested in profiles, I think that's a good way to go, as long as they're going to be compatible and you're not losing anything.
Sure.
I might encourage us to get on board with Vivo if you haven't made, for a couple of reasons. One is because it's funded by NCRR, and they're going to want to see as many schools as possible on it, as opposed to the one that was profiles. Does profiles come for free?
Right now it is.
Right now
For
it's
our
for
turn,
free.
It's free. I mean,
Okay, for our turn.
but you know, the other thing about profiles, I better wait to hear from Jose first.
We're recording.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We're recording.
And quick, short.
Yeah, I tried to move away so that we could move on. I heard
Yes,
somebody-
ma'am.
I heard somebody whisper.
Profiles and Vivo will talk to each other soon. The profiles group is actually started a few months ago a pilot project to make sure that the two systems talk to each other. We decided to adopt the Vivo platform because one of the things was that, I mean, Ponce School of Medicine is in Puerto Rico. They are already members of that consortium. Actually, I was one of the members of the profiles group when we wanted to get some funding from NCRR, and it didn't go through. But since Ponce was in that, second, at the time of the decision, I think it's the same at this time. I may be wrong, but at the time of the decision, profiles was not using semantic technology, but Vivo was. But profiles I know is moving or has already moved into that direction. But both systems will talk to each other. So my expectation is that profiles will be able to look into the Vivo system that we will have here. There was another element, and as you said, Vivo was already funded by NCRR, and it was our expectation that NCRR wanted us to get involved with the Vivo system at the time. But Profiles is also an excellent platform.